everyone, it's Vanessa. I'm here to wrap up the books that I ended up reading in the month of May. I ended up reading a lot of short books this month. The first one that I finished is called Ugliness. This book is kind of like a mix of a lot of things. There's poetry, there's pictures and images, like photography, there's like still shots from like TikTok. The ideas that the author has about beauty and ugliness and how we look at different aspects of our bodies as being ugly. She in particular focuses on her nose and also like the hair on her body, and she kind of turns the idea of ugliness on its head in this book by saying that we should actually use our ugliness to our advantage, or like use it in ways that subvert or mess with the status quo of what it is that beauty standards are in our world. This is written by an Afghan author that grew up in Berlin. Interesting, insightful. I read it on a train ride, and I pretty much read the whole thing, some going there and then some coming back. If you like kind of experimental nonfiction or creative nonfiction, I think this is interesting. I kind of wish she talked a little bit more about hairiness and like hair on our bodies, on our legs, on our arms, and what that means. She definitely mentions a lot about her nose. I also read Brownstone, which I don't have with me, and this is a young adult graphic novel. It is a fictional graphic novel, and it focuses on a family that is divorced, and the teenage daughter is spending a summer with her dad that she doesn't really have a good relationship with. She doesn't really have much history with him. A story about like not feeling like you fit in to your culture because you don't know the language as much. It's also set, I believe, in like the 90s. So there's aspects to that I feel are kind of confusing to the story. I don't really feel like it needs to be set in the 90s. And it's really a story about learning to love someone who is your parent who left you and you don't really know why. And so she's kind of questioning what it was that happened in his life to cause them to not have communication with each other. Not a very satisfying ending when it's revealed like why it is that he left. I also don't think the other characters in the story feel like friends. There's a lot of like the ways that it's drawn that feel very aggressive in parts, and like people name call and like say things to each other that I think cross lines. I just expected a little bit more from this, especially because it won some awards for the ALA Youth Media Awards too, so I just anticipated to like it a little bit more, and I just didn't really feel like the story was truly there. After that, I read Raising Hair. This is a nonfiction book. I liked it. I didn't love it. I thought it was an interesting insight into what it's like to try to take care of a wild animal. The author, who was very involved in like politics and government in the UK, noticed a hare, a leveret, it was a tiny little hare, knew that it had lost its mom and probably wasn't going to survive in the wild, and decided to take it upon herself to try to get the leveret to grow into a hare to then be able to go back into wild nature that's surrounding her house. So she kind of built it, enclosures and things, and even let it into her actual physical home. And so it's just an interesting look at how we fit in with nature, what it is that we've done over time to the habitats around our homes that have caused, you know, trouble for wild animals. But I don't think that this book kind of changed my life. Then I read Alligator Tears, and I really love this book. I think my only 5-star read of the month. This book is by Edgar Gomez. It is a book of essays about growing up, coming of age, growing up in South Florida in particular, with family dynamics that were difficult. This book was very visceral, and it reminded me a lot of childhood, and a lot of the things that he talks about in this essay collection are things that I think would apply to a lot of immigrant kids whose families had a hard time acclimating, succeeding, making money. I think all of those things are really beautifully rendered in this book of essays. There is an essay in here that talks about the Pulse nightclub shooting, and it's kind of an ode looking back at this place that was very important to him as well. It's a place that he frequented, his place accepting himself as a gay man, and what his mom thinks about that. He was also like interviewed in NPR, and he's like, I couldn't remember the night except for the fact that we were interviewed by NPR. So I went and listened to that interview too, of them like walking around the street. That final essay is about his mother and, you know, how hard his mom has had to work, how much her body has deteriorated over time. Also essays about his estranged father, who lives mostly in Puerto Rico, so he visits him and like sees how different and how alike they are and tries to reconnect with him. There are also more lighthearted essays as well, like like making YouTube videos, like makeup YouTube videos, when that became like a big thing in the early 2010s. There's an essay about working at a flip-flop shop in a mall, which is such a Florida thing to do. And I think that this book is just really, really emotional and evocative. I cried reading this book while I was literally pulling weeds in my backyard. It's so emotional and lovely, and I think the writing is amazing, and just him telling the story of the perseverance that he's had to make it as a writer, where he's at now. And yeah, it just makes me proud of him, and it makes me happy to be able to read something so vulnerable. I love this book, and I love this cover too. This millennial pink is like everything to me. And then after that I read Millie, which is the third book in the Dog Tales, I think it's called, series by McCall Hoyle. This book is about a rescue dog and a dog trainer who fosters and like retrains, tries to rehome dogs that are strays and don't have like the social capabilities to like live with humans. So she picks them out and retrains them. There's also a family in the story that is going through some hard times. The mom in the story, it seems like she's having some issues with substance abuse or something that just makes her not very present, and so she is being raised by her grandfather instead, and her grandfather owns a bakery. Her grandfather not really wanting her to have a rescue dog, and then you know what happens with all of these kinds of books is that this dog and this girl are meant to be, and so you see how it ends up being that way, that they get together. It's just a lovely middle grade book. Whenever I read these books, they're just like a really nice palate cleanser for me to like lift me up and make me feel good about the world. They're just so sweet. There's like a lot of the good in people and the good in animals, and how if we lean on each other, we're so much better off. And so I really appreciate that in these books. So I ended up giving Millie 4 stars, and I really enjoyed that series so far. I don't know if there's another one coming out. I think there might be a 4th coming out. Definitely will pick it up. I read a book that is also another follow-up. This one is Outsider Kids. This is the follow-up to Parachute Kids, which I read I think like 6 months ago, not very long ago. The second book in the series was coming out pretty soon thereafter, so lucky me. I really enjoyed this book. This book deals with a lot of heavy topics, just like Parachute Kids. A lot of younger kids, like second and third graders, are like picking up graphic novels. They just go in the graphic novel section and pick up whatever. And this definitely deals with heavier topics that I think need a grown-up to discuss with the reader if it's a younger kid reading it, because there is, you know, like immigration problems, like living undocumented, facing racism and trying to evade the cops, trying to put food on the table. Literally, you're feeding yourself. The older sister is the one that's like cooking for them. There's also a really big subplot in this about the brother who is figuring out that he is gay and finding his first like relationship that is on the page that we can see develop. Again, this is set I think in the 80s, so the sister's trying to understand his sexuality and accepting him, and then other people in their neighborhood and their community not accepting him. Towards the end, there's just like a switch of like escaping again. I just feel for these kids so much. I feel like the story is very propulsive and exciting and interesting and thrilling, but it's also like really devastating, the reasoning for why you're like turning the pages to see what it is that's going to happen. I just want them to be safe. I really love the characters in the story. This cousin comes and she's like super spoiled and rich, and seeing that juxtaposition of that versus the kids who are struggling to make it day by day and don't have a lot of money or food on the table. A lovely series. I definitely recommend, and I gave it 4 stars. I read Clorin Sky next, and I've had this book out for a while and I just hadn't picked it up. I finally did because I realized I had the audio from Libra FM as well, so I picked it up. It's a book in verse. It's by Mahogany L. Browne. I really ended up enjoying this book quite a lot. I definitely think it's for older young adult readers, like the time period that it's in. It's like the older teen years. The topics in here are really what made me like it so much. It talks about like a friendship that is disintegrating because of miscommunication and just like girls growing apart from each other, which happened a lot during that time period. So I think that that was very honest and true and real. It has to do also with like boys and like boys coming between the girls, lying about certain things that she, the main character, is not ready to lie for her friend. She is very moral and she has principles in her life. She gets a lot of this also from playing basketball, and the importance that basketball has in her life is also coming through in the story a lot. I really loved a lot of the writing. I think the writing is the star in this book. It's so bittersweet. You're really rooting for the main character. I would recommend this to people who like the kinds of characters that Jason Reynolds writes or that Renee Watson writes, all the people that blurb this book, Elizabeth Acevedo, Nick Stone, I think those are all really good comps for this book. And I don't hear this book talked about very much, so definitely pick it up if you're interested in an older teen girl and in those topics that I discussed of like friendship and changing and coming of age, and just really amazing in-verse writing as well. If you're into books in verse, I think this is definitely one to pick up. I guess this book's kind of like the month of 4-star reads. I read Feeding Ghosts, this really dense book that took me a long time to finish. I have to go give back to the library because there's like a super big holds list now because it won the Pulitzer, which is really exciting and awesome because I know how long it took to write this book. Looking into the author's and illustrator's life, as well as her mother's life and her grandmother's life, and seeing how her mother and her grandmother have gone through issues in their life that have influenced their mental health situations that are going on with them. This is going through a lot of Chinese history when it comes to the Communist Revolution and all of the very hard things that happened in China. Food insecurity and violence and death. And there's a lot going on with the illustrations and the drawings that you really have to suss out and really read everything and look at all of the pictures to see what is all going on, and then going through time, so going from like the 30s and 40s all the way up to present day, looking also at her and her mother's relationship with each other, with all of the trauma. Really, that is the main theme in the story, is like intergenerational trauma and how it continues on in the generations. I think it's definitely worth your time. It's like one of the most buzzed about graphic memoirs in recent memory. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Then I read a book that I don't really have that much to say about it just because it was so hard to read. It's called Crematorium. It is Reporting from the Land of Auschwitz by Joseph Debreceni. It was a book that was originally published in Hungary in 1950 and then never got translated until last year into English. It details very matter-of-fact, very journalistic style what it was like to be sent to Auschwitz and the neighboring areas as well. He went to some different labor camps. Just the living conditions that they were in with lice and typhoid and like the smells, like the way that everybody, how they went to the bathroom, how they ate, what kind of food they were given, and then being moved around to other places as well, how they were all so interconnected. He survived, and that's how we got this book. It's also a very interesting book about how the Nazis really like relegated different Jewish people who were in these camps to be in charge of like lower rung Jewish people. So they were kind of like, the way that that worked was fascinating to learn about, pretty devastating to read, and I didn't feel comfortable reading it. I feel like I don't want to read anything about World War II or Nazi Germany or the Holocaust for a while now. Yeah, very hard to read. Then I read Dog Days, and this one was Kyung-Suk Gendry Kim's newest book, I think. I think my third one of hers that I've read. I think I'm missing one more that I haven't read that's been translated by Janet Hong. I really enjoy her illustration style. I really enjoy the way that she uses nature in her illustrations to tell us about the good and the bad in people. In this book, she moves to the countryside to give her dog more space to roam around and to be, and then she realizes that the people in her neighborhood where she lives now think of dogs differently than her. They don't view them as pets, they view them as a nuisance or as like food to eat. How Kyung-Suk Gendry Kim is trying to understand where they're coming from their culture attitudes, the generation that they are from, because they're older people, and just like how devastating and difficult it is to live around that. She starts like rescuing dogs or like trying to find them better places, better homes to live, and starts to try to change the way that people view dogs in her new neighborhood in the countryside. And I think this book is another way that she is doing that. She says she has seen a difference in the afterward. Yeah, I just really enjoy her books. Some of the best, I think, adult graphic nonfiction that I've been reading lately. I've loved all of the ones that I've read. Grass and The Waiting, and then this one is Dog Days, and then I think that there's another one that I need to read. So that's Dog Days, and I gave it 4 stars. And then last but not least, the last book that I read was Private Revolutions, 4 Women's Face China's New Social Order by Yuan Yang. This one I ended up giving 3 stars. I think this was a really fascinating way to see what it's like to live in China as a woman now, the way that the economy is shaping up and how women's opportunities for careers and jobs are shaping up in like the late 2000s to like the mid to late 2010s. There's 4 different women that you're following, and they're all going through different ways. Some of them work in factories, some of them work in education, some of them start their own businesses, and it's just seeing how their lives change over time, looking at the one-child policy and them having their own children, how things have like relaxed in some ways and then tightened in other ways, and how the turn towards more open markets and like more capitalism has changed how they need to live their lives to make money, and how different that was for their mothers and fathers before them. I think that this was all right. I think it would have been stronger maybe if it was one single person story beginning to end before we moved on to the next person. In this book, they're kind of interspersed between each other, and I think it was kind of hard to keep them straight in my head over time in the audiobook. I also didn't just feel like an emotional connection to the women, and I think that that would have helped too for me to feel like I really understood what they were going through, to really feel their plight. There are some really touching aspects to this book, but I thought that the writing would hit better and would make me feel more for these women. That's all the books that I ended up reading. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Let me know if you want to read or have read any of these books down below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.